Hello and welcome to this episode of the podcast Widowhood Made Me Happier with me, your host, Tabby Kerwin. You are very welcome here. Thank you for joining me today in this episode where we're going to talk about growing a community to protect our mental health and grow with our grief. Because it's really important that we have not just people around us, but the right people around us. And the truth is that when you are grieving, when you have experienced a loss, whether that is the loss of a partner, a parent, a sibling, a child, a friend, the loss of anything that isn't a person, it's important that we get the support that we need in the way that we need it. But the truth is that not everyone knows how to cope with our grief, how to manage our grief, how to support us in our grief. And I think you really come to know this when you lose someone. So it became really evident to me, if I go all the way back to when I was 16 and lost my dad, how other people coped with the loss of my dad and how they managed my grief, because people didn't know how to support a 16-year-old. And this was right back in the early 1990s. And people didn't know how to support children in their grief at that time. So consequently, we didn't really get the support we needed. For me, I went back to boarding school and actually that probably was the best community to have around me at the time. It was partly a distraction. It was people that friends that I wanted to be around, and it was life as normal. It kind of made me detach myself from the reality of what had just happened with my dad dying. But people didn't know how to support me in grief, and consequently they don't. It's just assumed, well, you're back now, that's it, crack on, life happens as normal. And that was the expectation of other people as well, And the one thing that always sticks in my mind, how everyone used to tell me, adults, used to tell me as a child, oh, you should do this because that's what daddy would have wanted. And then the consequence of that is it really plays into this narrative of being that good girl, of being a people pleaser. Because all the people always told me, well, that's what daddy would have wanted. And of course, daddy was dead by this point. And so I'm not going to do anything that, wouldn't please him or, would make him sad. And there isn't him there to tell me it's okay, you can do what you want, do what you enjoy, align yourself with what you love. He wasn't there to tell me that, and I know in my heart of hearts that he would have done, but all I had to go on was be that good girl, because people always caveated with, well, daddy would have wanted you to do this, which consequently meant that I did things that I didn't want to do, but it kept everyone else comfortable, and it made them feel like they were guiding me in the best possible way to manage my grief. Spoiler alert, they weren't. It made them feel more comfortable, as if they were doing the right thing. And all it did was made me even more of a people pleaser, and live to this narrative of, being that good girl. Now, if we move it along a few decades, and when my husband died in 2018, what was really evident to me is the people around me in my life at that time, how uncomfortable they were with my sadness, that they didn't know how to support me or what to say to me or what to do, because obviously they had their own grief. For those that knew Simon, they had to navigate that. It was a shock for people because people didn't know he was ill, so it became quite suddenly the news that he had died. But the reality was that what I noticed is the lack of people being able to manage my sadness. And by that I mean the people that distance themselves from me because of a fear of not knowing what to say. So the easier thing to do in that instance is say nothing, because then we don't upset, we don't offend, we don't, potentially make you more sad or anything like that. We're pretty sad anyway. I don't think there is a layer of more sad that people can add on. And I can get my head around that. I can really get my head around this idea that people don't know how to support you in your sadness. They can't get on board with that. And so they distance themselves. And what you're left with then is what feels like the right people to support you. And you will lean on certain people that feels right for you. Or if you are that people-pleasing nature, if you've got that narrative of, always being the good girl, you don't want to burden other people, you feel like you should cope, that's when you put on this veil of I'm fine, and you struggle on by yourself. And yeah, I'm completely guilty of doing that. Now, I did have an outlet because I was writing, sharing, speaking, and so that very much is an outlet for me, and it's allowed me to connect with different people who either have shared experiences or who genuinely wanted to support. So My friendship circle, my support network changed when Simon died, because those that couldn't handle my sadness, they kind of dropped out of it. They just dropped out of it. And then other people who were there to hold me and go, do you know, it's okay, you can be sad. I'm fine with you being sad in my company. It's safe to be sad in my company. Those people, they were the people that, you know, that I kept close, that I could rely on. The people that I know wouldn't judge me if I just, you know, text them and said, look, I'm just not feeling it today. I don't want to come out today. I don't want to do this today. Those were the right people. And so I built a community around that. Now, here's the interesting thing. I can get my head around that. And I think a lot of widows, a lot of people that are living with grief, they can get their head around people not being able to understand their sadness, not being able to cope with it, not being able to manage it when they're trying to manage their own grief. We can get our heads around that. What was really massively interesting for me is the amount of people then that dropped out of my life, and my circle changed, my community changed again when I chose happiness, okay? When I chose to feel joy, when I chose to express joy publicly. That was the interesting part. When people that had been there could cope with the sadness, could navigate that, maybe felt useful and supportive of me at that time, how people couldn't cope, when I chose to feel joy, to allow my emotions to coexist, to experience happiness in one hand and hold my sadness in the other. People that could not get on board with that and consequently distance themselves. Because maybe it was because they felt useful when they were supporting me in my sadness. Or maybe it was they couldn't get their head around, okay, how can you be happy? How can you say you're a widow and you're sad and you're grieving when what you're doing is experiencing life? Maybe because I was traveling, or because I was writing, or because I was celebrating success in my business, or because I was celebrating getting up in the morning, you know, because some days you really don't want to do that. There's definitely days now still when I'm like, I just don't want to work. I don't want to function. In fact, in full disclosure, yesterday was one of those days, and I just had to give myself permission to rest because that's what I needed to do. I still had a few small pockets of doing things, but I needed just to have that time to not necessarily be sad and cry and not necessarily be happy and joyous. I just needed to just kind of exist for a day, and that's fine. But what was really noticeable is when I consciously chose joy and decided to choose happiness and do things and celebrate things that made me feel good, how people could not cope with that. And that's when I would get the, oh, should you really be saying that? Should you really be doing that? Would Simon want you to do that? Does that mean that you're over your grief? Does that mean that you are through it now, that you're fine and you're not sad ever again? Look, I tell you this so often, you don't get over your grief. You don't get through your grief. You grow with it, okay? And it's important that you have the right people around you that allow you to grow with it. So when I chose joy, again, there was a pool of people that couldn't handle that. And so I had to just let them phase out of my life because they weren't aligned with who I needed to be, who I was, who I am. And you know what? That is okay. I don't hold any grudge or malice or anger or anything towards these people. I just let them move away from my life. I allowed that distance to appear because we cannot allow those people to drag us back in the darkness with our grief, because grief is a dark place. It's a lonely place. Even when there's people around you, it's a sad place. It's a place that's full of so many mixed emotions. But when we choose to hold our grief in one hand, but also experience joy and happiness, and however that looks for you. For some people, that is finding a new partner. For some people, it is, doing amazing things with their life. For me, it's about being happy for me. I've learned who I am as a person, what I want as a person, and I live a very solo life now, and I'm really happy with that. Some people can't understand it. They want to drag me back into that darkness, and I don't want to go there. And I'm not going to go there. So I choose to let those people distance. Now, what happens is over the course of the last 7.5 years since Simon died, it's the people around me has changed dramatically so. And there's people that have come in, there's people that have gone out, there's new people come in who've become the closest people to me. There is a core of people that have been there all the time, and I would, absolutely rely on at the drop of a hat. I know that they are fine with me being sad. They're fine with me being happy. We're absolutely fine if we don't talk for a few months, but we pick back up where we left off. There are those people, that core of people who were amazing when Simon was ill. They were the few people that knew that he was ill. They were brilliant friends beforehand. There is that core of people, but the rest of it, has changed so dramatically and continues to change. And I'm okay with it, because what I've learned is that people are chapters in your lives. They are seasons, you could describe them. Some people aren't meant to be there all the time for the whole ride. Some people dip in and out when you need them, how you need them, in the version of themselves and yourself that you need them. And that's how it should be. Not every character in a story, in a book, is there in every single chapter. They might appear in at the start and then come back later on. And that's okay. We just leave the door open. And this is what we need to do. We need to build the community of people around us that allow us to protect our mental health. They allow us to be the version of ourselves that most aligns with our core and our purpose. But they are also the people that allow us the freedom to choose who we want to be. So we build this community around us, the people that let us protect our mental health, but also the people that allow us to grow with our grief. And they are the people that understands that one moment we could feel really sad, but we might feel really sad, but at the same time, we can do something truly amazing. So we want to build around ourselves this community of people. And then, as a wider note on this, we need to build communities in our organisations, in our workplaces, in our community groups, that allow other people to be the version of themselves they need to be in their grief. We need to have people that are aware and have the savviness to be able to support someone in the way that they need, because it's very individual. How we grieve is very, very individual. But we need to have people that are aware and can give the right support in the right way. The people that know what to say, or rather know what not to say. And really, there isn't, a right thing to say to people when they're grieving. There's some wrong things that you can say. And I think the biggest wrong thing is to say nothing. There is a fear about, I might say the wrong thing, so therefore I'm not going to say anything at all. Always say something. Always acknowledge the person that's died. Use their name. We haven't forgotten, as the people that have lost someone, we haven't forgotten that they've died. But actually, if you say their name, if you spark up a conversation about a memory you have with that person, or you ask me about that person if you never know them, I love that. And as widows and as people are grieving, we love that. We love to be able to keep the name of our loved ones alive. It's so important to share their stories, the things that they did, the things that made us smile, the things that frustrated us. We want to be able to share that. We want to keep their name alive. Saying nothing is not an option. So we need to develop communities in our workplaces and organisations and sports teams and music groups and so on that are grief savvy, that they can, know what to say, know how to support someone, know how to signpost someone to the help that they need. And I think that's really important. But there's a real lack of that awareness training. And when I really looked into it and dug deep, there's a couple of bereavement charities that you could go to. Now, it didn't work for me using those. And that was just a personal thing for me. That didn't work, but I totally believe in them. So what I have done is help to raise funds and things for those charities so they can support other people. But the support wasn't right for me personally. And that was just the way I was navigating my grief. But I truly believe in them, which is why I literally climbed Mount Kilimanjaro to raise funds for cruise bereavement care. So that could help other people, because it's really important. But what there is a lack of is grief awareness training. Now, we see a lot of mental health training now, which is really good. And I train people in mental health protection and awareness and support. But there's a lack of grief training. So, when I really dug into this, I couldn't believe actually how, for something that we all experience, we will all experience grief. There's such a lack of, how to manage either your grief or how to support someone else in their grief. So obviously I created something, which you can find over at theperformexperience.com. And my grief support and awareness course is so important. It's just a little bit more content, addition, advice, awareness training on top of what you might get in a mental health awareness training. But it helps you to be able to support someone else in their grief. And obviously I do have different resources in supporting you in your own grief. So if you're an individual and you are grieving, then please head over to theperformexperience.com. You can find some free resources for you there to help you on your journey with grief and navigating it. And you will find something from a very simple free resource then leading up to things that might be a little bit more helpful further down the line, how to, live with your grief, some different kind of ideas and methods from around the world actually, and how to navigate grief. And then also growing with grief for those of us that really want to flourish with it, that want to take our grief in one hand and go, okay, I completely acknowledge this is where I am, but I want to achieve this. I want to find my purpose and align. So they are all there. But please also know, if people are struggling to support you, if in your workplace you didn't get the support that you needed, because it's very, very poor, the grief support that workplaces have to give, because it's, there isn't any compliance. You don't have to do everything. Obviously, we're coming into a time where bereavement policies are now being implemented, but it's like you can have 2 weeks off work and then, okay, we expect you're done and dusted and move on. Grief isn't like that. So, let's make that better. So advocate in your organizations, in your workplaces, in your community groups to put better grief support, because every single person is going to experience grief at some time, and we have to know how to support them. What is the right thing to do? What we probably shouldn't do? How do we build the best community around people to help them protect their mental health but grow with their grief and be the best version of themselves? So go and check out those resources at theperformexperience.com. If you are living with grief or struggling with your grief or mental health, please also nip over there. There are some signposting resources for you to support you, and I will put those details in the show comments as well. So really think about the community around you. Know that it's okay that that community changes if you're living with your grief, and people come in and out of your life as chapters, as seasons, okay? And that is okay. It's fine for people to be there all the time. It's fine for someone to have been there for a while but then go out because it doesn't align with you anymore. It's fine to bring in new people that you've never met but totally get you, and you end up being really close to them. It's all fine. It's all okay. You have to build the community that is right for you, and then also help workplaces, organizations to create communities that are grief savvy, that are grief safe. Okay? Thank you for joining me this week. I will see you in the next episode of Widowhood Made Me Happier.